Okay, this video we are going to review the supply and demand diagrams. So we have a diagram like this. So vertical axis, we put the price on the vertical axis and the quantity on the horizontal axis. And by the way, this is just convention that we always put the price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontals. Usually, when we put say y on the vertical axis, x on the horizontal axis, we actually means that okay, y depends on x, but not in this case. Okay, so here actually quantity of demand, say quantity of demand or quantity of supply, depends on price, not the other way. So be aware of this point. Okay, so on the price and quantity space, so let me pick arbitrary point. Okay, say point A, which means the price is at this level, PO. Associated quantity, let's look at demand first. Okay, associated quantity demand is QO. Okay, now let me decrease the price. Okay, let's further suppose that this is a market of coffee. So let me, starting from point A, let me decrease the price of coffee by a little bit, because price decrease, demand for coffee will goes up. We call this law of demand. So quantity goes up. So we arrive at point B, and if we repeat this exercise many times, we can have many points here, and link all these points together. We arrive at what we call demand function. So this says that the price, this link quantity demand to the price of the goods, price of coffee. So quantity of demand for coffee as a function of price of coffee, and holding everything else constant. So if other factors, for example, like income, like the price of substitute goods changes, the demand will shift. The whole demand schedule will shift. Okay, so this is the demand function. Let's look at supply. Again, let's start with picking up particular point, say point A. Which means that the price as a PO, quantity of supply for coffee, again this is the market for coffee, is a QO. Okay, what's going to happen if suppose the price increase? Price of coffee goes up. What happened to the coffee shop? Everything else being equals, the coffee shop will increase the supply of coffees. So we reach at point B. And if we repeat this exercise many times, we can have many points here. So let's link all these points together. We arrive at what we call supply curve or supply function. So it actually links quantity of supply as a function. So this actually more specifically is increasing function of price. Okay, so it's upward sloping. In contrast, demand is downward sloping. So this is actually decreasing function of price. Okay, so we have this supply and demand. So let's put them together. So demand is downward sloping, supply is upward sloping. And by looking at these diagrams, clearly we should think that the intersection point here is something of importance. It is. This is, we call this equilibrium of the market. And the equilibrium point means that the equilibrium price for coffee is at PO, let's call it PO. Equilibrium quantity is QO, little QO. Okay, why is this? Why is E the market equilibrium? It's because at E, quantity of supply is equal to quantity of demand. Let's say, suppose for some reason, whatever it is, say market equilibrium, the price of the coffee is at this level, P1. So market price coffee is, say, P1, which is bigger than PO, suppose. Okay, then at the P1, quantity of supply. So at P1, the associated quantity of supply, we go from P1 to the supply curve. So it's this many. So this is QS. It's bigger than the quantity of demand, go from price to the demand curve. So this is QD. So that means i.e. there's excess supply. So this put a downward pressure on price of the coffee, because now there are more supply than demand. So eventually the price will drop. So price drop. And you should note that as price drops, excess supply decrease. So until it reach PO. Okay, so if we start from a market price higher than equivalent price, then it naturally drops down to the equivalent price. Okay, so now here's a little exercise for you. What will happen if the market price P2, let's say, is less than PO? So indeed, we see that point E is the market equilibrium. So that's the very basic supply and demand framework. we can use this to analyze if there's a shock to the market, what will happen. And we call this comparative static analysis. Okay, so now this coffee market, and we have demand this, supply this. Initially, the equilibrium is at point E, which means the market price is PO. Market demand, market equilibrium quantity is QO. Okay, so now let's say, suppose there's a drought in Brazil, I suppose. Presumably Brazil is the country who supply the coffee beans. Okay, so there's a drought. So which negatively affect the coffee bean production. So that's the shock. That's the shock to the market. Then what we want to do is how we want to use this supply and demand diagram to analyze how will the market respond to this shock. And in doing so, we usually need to distinguish between short run and long run. So there's a time frame short run and long run. So the difference between short run and long run is that in the short run, something are fixed. Usually, say the number of suppliers, number of firms in the market is fixed. You cannot adjust too much. In the long run, you have more degree of freedom to adjust through firm enter the market or leave the market. And consumer can also change the taste. All right. So in the short run, okay, this due to the drought, there are fewer coffee beans. The cost of coffee beans increase. So at every price level, so cost of coffee bean increase. So this means that at every price level of coffee, at every coffee price level, producers or suppliers will produce fewer coffee. Fewer coffee because it's more expensive. So, i.e., supply curve shift to the left. This is equal. This is O, this is SO, this is S1. So equilibrium move from point E to point F. So equilibrium move from E to F, which means higher price goes up, and equilibrium quantity goes down. Okay, that's in the short run. In the long run, so in the long run, so because the draft, say in the long, as time goes by, drafts might might be over. Okay, so coffee bean production goes back. So okay, in the long run, everything else being equal. In the short run, we see that this supply curve shift to the left due to the increase in the cost of coffee bean. In the long run, because of drought is over, everything go back to normal. So farmers, they increase the production of coffee beans. So cost of coffee beans drop back to its original levels. So this supply of coffee shift back from S1 to S0. So farmers draft over cost of coffee bean reduce to the original levels. So supply curve shift from S1 to S0, equilibrium shift from F back to E. So we get back to the normals. Okay, so let's how we can use the supply and demand diagram to analyze what happened if there's a shock to the market.